Imagine living in your own home, a place where you fought hard for peace and safety, only to have that sanctuary turned upside down by a stranger's anger. That's exactly what happened to one disabled veteran who found himself the target of a shocking act of vandalism, orchestrated by none other than an HOA member, an individual with a troubling reputation for causing chaos in the community. What started as a petty dispute over a few harmless decorations quickly escalated into something far darker. When the veteran returned home one afternoon, he was greeted not by the comfort of his own space, but by the sight of his home defaced and damaged. The situation could have gone unnoticed, but fate had other plans. A Pentagon official, who just happened to be in the area on business, witnessed the aftermath firsthand and took immediate action. It wasn't just a case of a disgruntled neighbor, it was much bigger than that. The twist: the woman responsible wasn't just any HOA member. She was someone with a history of pushing boundaries, and now, her actions had caught the attention of those who could do something about it. But how did it all unfold, and what happened to her when the authorities finally stepped in? Stay tuned to find out. The disabled veteran, who had served his country with honor, had spent years creating a peaceful life for himself in a quiet neighborhood. But the Homeowners Association, HOA, which was supposed to protect residents, became a source of constant stress for him. He'd always been a quiet neighbor, following the rules, but there was one member of that HOA who seemed determined to make his life harder. Karen, a woman with a reputation for being difficult and overbearing, had taken an immediate dislike to him. It started small, silly complaints about his yard, his mailbox, even his flagpole, but it quickly spiraled into something more malicious. Karen's power within the HOA seemed unchecked, and she wasn't shy about using it to target anyone she deemed as non-compliant. When she decided that the veteran's home didn't meet her standards, she began her campaign. Letters piled up, each one more demanding than the last, threatening fines and even legal action. But the veteran refused to give in. He had already sacrificed so much for this country. He wasn't about to let a bully take away his peace of mind. Then one day the vandalism happened. His property was spray-painted with hateful messages, and his front door was severely damaged. But Karen wasn't done yet. The worst part, she wasn't acting alone. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, the unexpected happened. A higher power stepped in, and the entire situation began to unravel. As the veteran stood there, staring at the damage, it was clear this wasn't just a random act of vandalism. There was a deliberate cruelty behind it. Karen's disdain for him had grown more personal with each passing day, and now she'd crossed a line. The veteran felt a deep sense of betrayal, not only from her, but from the HOA that seemed to turn a blind eye to her behavior. He tried to reach out to the board before, hoping they'd see how unreasonable she had become, but each time his concerns were dismissed. He was just another problem they didn't want to deal with. But what struck him even more was the realization that this wasn't just about his property, it was about power. Karen had used her position in the HOA to bully and control, and now she was taking things to a dangerous extreme. The veteran knew he couldn't let her get away with this. His entire life had been spent fighting for justice, and he wasn't about to let this go unchecked. Meanwhile, Karen's arrogance grew. She knew she was in control, or at least she thought she was. She made it clear to anyone who would listen that she had no fear of repercussions. After all, who would challenge her? She had the HOA on her side, didn't she? But the unexpected presence of the Pentagon official added an unpredictable twist. The veteran had no idea that someone so powerful had witnessed the aftermath of the vandalism. The official, a high-ranking individual with connections that went far beyond the local community, knew this was no ordinary neighborhood dispute. He could see the bigger picture, the abuse of power, the victimization of a man who had served his country. What he didn't know was just how deep the corruption in the HOA went, or how far Karen would go to maintain her hold on everything. As Karen's actions started to get more erratic, whispers began to circulate about her past. Some neighbors began to question whether her position in the HOA was really as legitimate as she claimed. The more people talked, the more rumors spread. Had she been using her power for personal gain all along? Was there something even darker lurking behind her facade? The veteran couldn't afford to trust anyone, not even those who seemed to be on his side. He had to be careful, for every move he made could be watched by someone who had a lot to lose. But the clock was ticking, and soon enough, the truth would come out. As the days passed, the veteran found himself trapped in a web of suspicion and uncertainty. The vandalism was just the beginning. Now, he was caught in a dangerous game with Karen, who seemed to be escalating things with every passing moment. The neighborhood that had once felt like a refuge was now a battlefield, and the veteran was the unwilling target. Karen was relentless, making veiled threats and pushing him in ways that felt more menacing with each encounter. But it wasn't just her. The HOA's silence spoke volumes. Despite numerous complaints, no one from the board had reached out to offer support or even investigate what had happened. It was as if the entire system had been compromised. The veteran had grown accustomed to being overlooked, but now something had shifted. He wasn't just fighting for his home anymore. He was fighting for the truth to be seen, for the corruption to be exposed. And as much as it pained him to admit it, he knew he couldn't do it alone. Then, just when he thought things couldn't get worse, Karen's next move came. One evening, a truck rolled up to the veteran's house, her truck. He watched from his window as she stepped out, clipboard in hand, an unsettling smile on her face. She was getting bolder, her actions becoming more open and dangerous. This wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. This was about control. And in the background, whispers of her past began to surface, rumors about her connections to other HOA members, people who might be involved in things far more sinister than property disputes. What the veteran didn't know was that the Pentagon official had been quietly working behind the scenes. He had used his influence to gather information about Karen, learning things that even the veteran hadn't known. But the official's investigation had drawn the attention of people who didn't want this truth to come to light. A dangerous power struggle was unfolding, and soon, everything would come to a head. With each passing day, the tension grew thicker. The veteran knew it was only a matter of time before something big happened. But would he be ready when it did? And would Karen's web of lies and intimidation finally unravel, or would she manage to get away with it all? The clock was ticking, and the moment of reckoning was drawing nearer. The night before the storm hit, the veteran sat at his kitchen table, his mind racing. The walls felt like they were closing in. Karen had become more brazen, and he could feel the weight of her threats pressing on him. But something gnawed at him. There was more to this story than he had realized. What had started as petty harassment had morphed into something much darker, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The Pentagon official's involvement gave him a glimmer of hope, but it also made things far more dangerous. That evening, the unexpected happened. As the veteran sat, deep in thought, his phone rang. It was an unknown number, but the voice on the other end was familiar. It was the Pentagon official. The calm tone of the man's voice made the veteran uneasy. "You need to listen carefully," the official said. "There's something you don't know about Karen. She's more dangerous than you think, and you're not just dealing with a rogue HOA member anymore. She's tied to a much bigger operation than anyone realizes." The words hit the veteran like a punch to the gut. Karen wasn't just a bully in the neighborhood. She was connected to people in power, people who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. The official went on, explaining how Karen had been using her position not just for petty control over the neighborhood, but to launder money and facilitate deals that stretched far beyond the HOA's small borders. But just as the veteran tried to process this new information, the official dropped another bombshell. Karen knew he had been looking into her. She knew everything, his every move, his conversations, even his meetings with the official. The realization hit like a cold wave. There was a mole, someone within the veteran's circle, leaking information to Karen. It was no longer just Karen trying to silence him. There were powerful forces watching every step he took. The walls had been closing in on him for a long time, but now they were tightening faster than he could react. There was no one left he could trust, and the forces against him were far more dangerous than a rogue HOA member. The veteran had no choice but to act, but even as he planned his next move, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already a step behind. The countdown was on, and he had no idea who would come out on top when the dust finally settled. The veteran knew the time had come. With Karen's network of powerful allies and the mole in his own camp, he had to make his move carefully, or it would all be over. The official had given him one last piece of advice: don't confront her directly. She's expecting that. You have to outsmart her. The veteran had always relied on his instincts, whether it was on the battlefield or in the quiet of his own home, and now those instincts were his only weapon. That night, under the cover of darkness, he put his plan into motion. He had been gathering evidence for weeks, carefully documenting Karen's actions and connecting the dots between her and the illicit dealings she'd been involved in. He knew he had enough to expose her, but the question was whether anyone would believe him, especially with Karen's influence running deep within the HOA and beyond. The tension in the air was palpable as the veteran made his way to the HOA building, the nerve center of the operation. His heart pounded as he approached the front door, but when he stepped inside, what he saw stopped him dead in his tracks. Karen was there, but she wasn't alone. She was sitting calmly at a table, with the last person he expected to see, the Pentagon official. His stomach dropped. What was going on? Had he been betrayed? Had the official been playing him all along? Karen looked up and smiled, her expression cold and smug. "I see you figured it out," she said, "but you're too late. You should have listened when you had the chance." The veteran stood frozen, his mind racing for answers. The official, now standing beside Karen, spoke. "You've been a pawn in a much larger game. The truth is, we never intended for you to win. The moment you started digging into Karen's operations, you became a liability. But don't worry, we found a much more useful purpose for you." In that instant, everything clicked into place. The official wasn't just a bystander in this fight. He was part of the operation, a hidden hand behind the scenes. The veteran had been used as a distraction, a means to flush out potential threats to their carefully crafted network. His investigation had been the key to revealing what was hidden, but instead of exposing Karen, it had drawn him directly into her trap. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the unexpected happened. A group of local residents, people who had quietly been watching, silently supporting the veteran, broke through the door. The mole, who had been feeding information to Karen, had made a fatal mistake. They had uncovered his identity and exposed his betrayal. The real mastermind behind the operation was someone far closer to the veteran than he had ever imagined. In a final twist, the official and Karen were taken by surprise. Their carefully laid plans began to unravel as the community, led by the very people who had been afraid to speak up, turned the tide. As Karen and the official were arrested, the veteran realized that his fight wasn't just about him. It was about something bigger, about standing up to those who thought they could get away with manipulation and power. But as they were led away in handcuffs, Karen turned to the veteran one last time and whispered, "This isn't over. You've won this battle, but there are others who will finish what I started." A cold shiver ran down his spine, but for now, the victory was his. The fight might not be over, but he had finally taken back control of his life. With Karen and the Pentagon official behind bars, the veteran felt a mix of relief and disbelief. The weight that had hung over him for so long was finally lifting, but there was a lingering tension in the air. The betrayal, the manipulation, it had all been so much more than he could have imagined. But through it all, he had remained true to himself, refusing to back down, no matter the cost. His fight had never been just about a home or an HOA dispute. It had been about holding onto his dignity and ensuring that no one, no matter how powerful, could trample on what was right.